Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, first of all, I'm back at the hostage room out at the commander's facility, as you can see behind me. You can follow us there, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there at Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always, always, always much appreciated. Today, I'm joined by ESPN's Mike DiRocco. You can follow him for all your Jaguars coverage leading up to the game and during the game. It's at ESPN DiRocco. He wrote a story this past week on the change in Trevor Lawrence from one year to the next with the new coaching staff, et cetera, and how that's impacted him. We're going to talk about the Jaguars, of course. What is the difference with Trevor Lawrence? But not just Lawrence. It's also the change that Doug Pederson has made in taking over for Urban Meyer after last year, and what a disaster that was last year. Also, the other changes, pass rushers. There's more of them. There's more weapons for Lawrence. What kind of difference will those players make? Trayvon Walker, first pick in the draft, what difference does he make? Some good insight from Michael DiRocco. So pay attention to that in a few minutes. Don't forget, you can follow me on ESPN.com, read my stuff there. I'm going to start with that because I wrote a story this week on, as everybody did, on quarterback Carson Wentz and the changes for him. I focused on just his comfort level in this area, how much more settled he feels, and how much more they like it here as opposed to other stops they've been, and how it fits their pace of life, and how can that help him in the facility, how he's grown. He's a different person at 29 than he was when he was 24 years old going to the Eagles, or 22 years old going to the Eagles. And he's different than he was a few years ago. When you have kids, you have a wife, you progress in your life and your career, things change for you. How can that help him? Will it help him? The two words for him right now, comfort. It's not just in the area, it's with the talent around him. How much is that going to make a difference? Because it might be the most talented skill group he's been with in the NFL, certainly more than what he had in Indianapolis last year. What kind of difference will that make? And then just for himself, and this is something I didn't get a lot into because we've talked a lot about it, but the consistency of his game. I had talked to Troy Aikman in a conference call last week, and I said, what do you want to see from me? He said, see from Wentz. And he said, consistency, not just from season to season, but game to game, week to week, series to series, play to play. That's something that we'll see. And how can the talent around him help with that? Clearly, it's going to make a difference. He's no different than a lot of other quarterbacks in that mid-tier level where you say, yeah, he could be this, but he also has to improve this. Same with Wentz. Anyway, give it a read. It's up on ESPN.com. So let's get to some other topics. Injuries. We're going to start there, and we'll go to safety Keim Curl. Did not practice on Thursday. He did have the cast off on his right wrist, which was protecting his thumb. He was at the doctor's yesterday. We don't know his status yet for Sunday. All we know is he did practice and the cast was gone. He had a kind of a big pad on his wrist. It wasn't huge. It just covered the hand and a little bit around the wrist. And it was taped on there. Don't know what that means for Sunday, but the cast was not on his wrist today. Now then, tight end Logan Thomas was limited in practice. He's been limited. He has said that he doesn't know about his status for Sunday, that it'll be week 2 at the latest. That's what I've been hearing all along. And I think that's true. We've watched him practice. I can't say that he looks exactly the same as he did before the injury. And sometimes your mind plays tricks on you when you're trying to watch how's a guy moving. He's never been the fastest tight end. He's a good athletic tight end, but he's not Vernon Davis out there. So sometimes you're looking for things that maybe haven't been part of his game, but does he look the same? It's hard to tell. So it wouldn't shock me if they wait till week 2 for him. But John Bates, tight end, has been practicing in full. That's a good sign. Cole Turner, the rookie tight end, was limited with the hamstring injury. He did tell me last week that he was going to play in the opener and that he felt good the previous week. So he's felt good for a little bit. So I think there's probably a good chance that he does play. All right, now let's move on to the running back situation. We talked to Antonio Gibson this week, and it was the first time we've talked to him since that preseason opener when he had the fumble, when Brian Robinson kind of supplanted him as the primary running back. And I think one thing Gibson did do is he admitted that the fumble got to him. And I think it wasn't just that, it was the reaction to it as well. But even he said that he did not handle it well. And just maybe with his attitude or whatever it was. I do think it really bothered him. And again, just the reaction to it, I think also bothered him. But one thing the coaches will tell you is they loved how he ran the ball when he went back in the game on that ensuing play after the fumble in the preseason opener against Carolina. I don't want to make a ton of deal out about one fumble, but we know what the issue was last year. And to me, the bigger part, and to the coaches, is not just the fumbles, it's the way he runs. They want to see the consistency in the way he runs, which they say then in turn, decreases the fumbling. So on the next play is exactly what they want to see. Or the first play, he ran the ball after his fumble. He runs a little, runs outside to the left, turns it upfield, keeps his shoulder squares, and runs through a defensive back. It's only 4 yards, but it was a style of run and what he showed, plant, go, power. That's what they want to see. And if they see that, they're going to be very happy with what he does. They saw that in the finale last year against the Giants. They see it again Sunday. I think it's going to be a really good day for Antonio Gibson. There you go. Chase Young. So there was a little report the other night about how he went to Von Miller's pass rush camp and he suffered a setback, et cetera. Not true. And I didn't give it any oxygen the other night because it wasn't true. And I don't always like knocking down things because there's sometimes a lot of things that give out there that aren't accurate. That's one of them. I can't tell you that, first of all, he didn't go to the pass rush camp. He did work out one time with Von Miller because they go to the same rehab facility out in Denver. And the other thing to note is that as far as a setback, I think it's actually the opposite. I think they feel pretty good about where he's at in his recovery. And I think we'll find out in the next couple of weeks at what point he might return. I think there's optimism there. Don't know for sure yet where it's going, but I do think there's optimism about when he could return. Just got to see if it plays out that way. There you go. Now, the other thing, one of the things I want to talk about is the defense, Bobby McCain. One of the differences in this defense, and it's got to show up Sunday, because if it doesn't, this is all just talk. But the talk has been better this year. We've talked a lot about communication in the secondary and the defense in general. But I think the other thing too is, and I was talking to Bobby McCain about this, that he understands the corners a lot better now than when he did a year ago. And you have to learn how guys play, and you can then play off of it. You can, for example, he was talking about how he knows which corners like to play off more in certain coverages versus the other one. And sometimes, I've told you this, William Jackson will play a little bit deeper than Kendall Fuller in some looks. And then McCain knows how to play accordingly off of that. And I remember talking one time to Will Blackman when he was a safety and how much it helps to know the corners. And the corner can sometimes turn back and say, hey, I'm going to need more help on this play, or somebody can shout that to him and the guy knows how to react, or they just automatically know in this corner wants more help. I remember Blackman one time told me, like, Josh Norman would do that to him. And then one time I think Will was like, just basically yelled at him, Josh, you make all this money, you're on your own on this play, because he had to go help on the other side. So, but it does matter. I think that's one reason why they feel better entering the season they did at this time a year ago, just for that reason. Again, it's got to play out that way. Otherwise, it's all talk. The other thing that's been interesting this week is for reporters being back in the locker room. And you hear a lot of things, you see a lot of things, and most stuff you're not going to go out there and report. And I'm not even reporting this, and I don't you don't eavesdrop on things. But one thing that it does show you is a glimpse into certain players and how they are. And John Allen, for example, one of the things that he was doing the other day was just giving a young player advice. And it was just all about the workout schedule, when he has found the best time to work out for his body is, and why that's important. And I think it's just something that it shows the veteran wisdom, leadership, and all that. And it's just a little snippet that you get into some players when you're able to be around them a lot more. And then the other part of it is just getting to know them as people, having basic conversations with guys, talking to players about their colleges or whatever. That stuff is all good because it helps establish and develop relationships. That's the value of being in there. Don't want to go too hard on that, but I did think it was interesting to hear John Allen talking about that. Typically, I don't tell you what they're saying in there about that stuff, but that one is one I think is kind of basic, but I think it was interesting as well. Also, a programming reminder. My son Matthew is doing a college football preview every week. It's called Inside the Hashes, 5 minutes or so, looking at the big games of the week and making some picks. Check that out on Empire Media. And don't forget, I'm going to be doing a YouTube show, live YouTube show on Tuesday night. I'm typically going to be joined by Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Commanders, and who will also be on with me after the games on Sunday. And we'll just go over a lot of the game. We will have rewatched the game by that point. We can talk about that, take some questions, all that good stuff. Tuesday night, look for that, 7:30 Eastern time. There you go. Now, that's enough from me. Let's get to my interview, my conversation, I should say, with ESPN's Michael DiRocco. Mike, it's finally nice to talk about actual games because it feels like from this team, like forever since they played a game that mattered. I'm sure it feels like that for everybody, but for you, last year must have been something unique for you to cover. What was that experience like?
It was like nothing I've ever gone through. And I covered Urban in his entire tenure at the University of Florida. So I've had experience dealing with Urban and the unpredictability of his behavior and all that other stuff. But I mean, never in my journalistic career, which is rolling along at 30 years, have I had to worry about a head coach in a nightclub, getting caught on video, and never have I ever dealt with a guy who was that disliked and that just had no feel for his team, had no feel for dealing with players, had no idea that he was doing everything that he could possibly do wrong. It was, like I said, I've never experienced anything like it. And I'm not sure if Urban had been around this year that I would have been able to make it through another year.
Oh, it sounded crazy. So how does that filter down to the team? And like, what was the impact during the season for these guys? And I know like we weren't in the locker rooms last year, so sometimes it's hard to know, but what was it like for them? How do you think it affected them?
Well, nobody was happy. That's the bottom line. And you take all that off the field stuff, out of it too. I mean, he's yelling at players, allegedly yelling at players, and guys are unhappy and they don't want to be there. And the best offensive player, running back James Robinson, is getting benched for fumbling, and Carlos Hyde, who played for Herb at college, is on the field despite fumbling right away. I mean, it was nobody was happy inside the entire building. And it's not just the players. It was, marketing, ticketing, sponsorships, all of that. It was just a feeling of dread coming into work every day. And, you're relying on the number one overall pick in Trevor Lawrence to kind of drag your franchise along. And that's unfair for the kids. So it was, guys, you could tell once that season was over, guys were ready to get the heck out of there and just wash this season out of their minds.
So what's it been like with Doug Pederson? I mean, just it sounds like anybody who's going to come in is going to make a tremendous difference. What's it been like with him?
It's a 180. I talked to people early in, I think it was February, right after he was hired. And, this was people inside the building, not, players or what have you, but in that marketing sponsorship business. And they said, look, the atmosphere in here, it's like Christmas morning every day, because we come in and we're happy to be here. We feel like we've got a guy who knows what he's doing. We feel like have a guy here in charge that respects us, that understands how to be an NFL head coach and what it is to run an NFL franchise. And, when the players got back, they felt the same way. I mean, it's been a much happier group of guys. Now, again, they haven't won or lost any games yet, and no one's been hurt or anything like that. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. But the bottom line is the atmosphere is 180 degrees from what it was with Urban Meyer, and they may not be very good, but at least they'll be happier and more well-adjusted this season than they were last year.
Well, how do you think it can impact them on the field? I mean, what differences do you think we'll see, or you guys will see, just because of all that?
Well, I think, Pederson's a former NFL quarterback. He won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles, and we've all seen how Nick Foles has played since then. People here in Jacksonville are still scarred by that signing. And he turned Carson Wentz into an MVP. So you add all that into the fact that he's got a reputation as a good guy to play for, and you can kind of see a massive difference in this offense just from that stuff alone. Forget getting into scheme and having Trevor Lawrence, have three other former college or NFL quarterbacks in the meeting room with him. It's just been so much more professional, and that you can't overlook that after what was here last year.
What for Lawrence? Obviously, he's going to be the big name in this whole equation, the big deal. So what have you seen from him this summer compared to last year? The growth, areas of growth.
Yeah, without question, more calm, more confident. He's making more decisive decisions, or he's being more decisive with his throws. You could see it immediately in OTAs where he was just on the field and the way he dropped back and the way he slung the ball around all over the place. You could feel that he was more confident and comfortable. And that makes sense partly because he's going into year two, but you also have to remember his first year, he ends up having surgery on his non-throwing shoulder, so he doesn't really work out as much as he could. Then he goes into training camp and he's competing for a starting job with Gardner Minshew because, again, Urban Meyer. So he misses every other day with the first team, all those valuable reps. And then you take into account all the dysfunctional stuff that was going on behind the scenes. And then he has to step up and be the face of the franchise and the leader to say enough is enough. This has to stop. Well, yeah, it's no wonder he threw only 12 touchdown passes and 17 picks. The kid was dealing with a mess. And, with all that gone, he was naturally going to be more calm and comfortable and confident. But you see it on the field immediately in the spring. And, that leads you to think, you know what, with a full offseason under his belt where he can relax and then get involved in this Doug Pederson offense, maybe he's got a chance to make that year two leap.
And you had a story recently that kind of showed a little bit of that swagger coming out in him too, right?
Yeah, he had the Dikembe Mutombo little finger, right? Yeah, you're like, no, 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 no. It was really, really subtle. And I don't think, like I wrote in there, nobody saw it. None of the players saw it. And it was caught sort of on the Jumbotron really quick when he threw this ball over a leaping DB to Marvin Jones for a great catch. And it was just a real quick thing there. And to me, that shows a little bit of confidence and a little bit that he's sort of feeling it. You know what I mean? And I don't think there was any time last year, except for maybe the season finale against the Colts, where he was really kind of feeling it. And that's got to be a good sign if you're a Jags fan.
Now, they also surround with more talent. They gave $2 billion to Christian Kirk, or maybe it was $3 billion. I can't remember, but they gave him a lot of money.
It broke that wide receiver market.
Yes, they did. And you know what? Terry McLaurin thanks them for that. So, that's all good for them. But they brought in Zay Jones, Kirk, Evan Ingram. What's the impact?
Well, Christian Kirk played one half of one preseason game. He was targeted 8 times and caught 5 passes for 54 yards. So automatically, he's going to be a significant part of this offense. He's the best playmaker that Trevor has had in his year plus, almost one game in his career. Last year, Marvin Jones was their top receiver, and Marvin's a good guy, and he's a good number 3, and he's reliable. But I mean, you can't win in the NFL if that's the best receiver you have. And you add in Kirk, who, they move him around a lot, but he's primarily going to play in the slot. And then you add Zay Jones, who has some decent outside speed, and really at the end of camp was probably making more plays than anybody down the field. Evan Ingram is a guy that, he's probably the best pass catching tight end this franchise has ever had. And he hasn't even played.
When he catches the ball.
Exactly. He's been hurt, and he does lead all NFL tight ends in drops since he came into the league. So, and we saw some of that in camp for sure. I think Lawrence's first interception was a touchdown that bounced off of his arms and was picked off. I mean, so that's going to be an issue that they're going to have to deal with. But, you add in Travis Etienne to the mix, who didn't play at all last year and is explosive and one of those guys that can take it to the house from anywhere. And all of a sudden, your weapons around Trevor Lawrence are significantly better than they were last year. Are they elite? Probably not. But, if you're middle of the pack or better, that's a huge step for him.
How's Grand Sheriff been?
Oh, fantastic. You can tell he's just a pro's pro, a guy that gets in there and does his job. And, he's not real talkative with us, as you probably know, but
more talkative than Andrew Norwell.
Well, yeah, I could have. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff sitting at my desk that's more talkative than Andrew Norwell. But you can tell the other guys really love him. And it's really good for the center, Luke Fortner, who's a rookie, to have that guy, an all-pro guard who's been in the league for 7 years, this is year 8, right next to him to kind of help him through that process. I mean, that if you had to have a rookie center, that's exactly who you'd want right next to him to help him out.
With ETN and watching him, like he can be dangerous with the ball in his hands anywhere, right? Especially in the pass game. As a runner, what do they think of him? Because like there are times where he likes to bounce a little bit. So where's the running game at with him? And then James Robinson coming back. Where's the run game at right now for the Jags?
Well, Etienne's a better inside runner than I expected him to be. And they have used him as RB1 all camp because James Robinson's been dealing with that Achilles. He's going to play on Sunday or should play. Doug Pederson said he should play, but I mean, the guy hasn't played in the game. He really hasn't done any teamwork except for the last week. It's going to be a rough start for him. He's got to get back into football shape. So ETN is the guy. And, that was one of the things you wonder, is he going to be one of those young guys that tries to take it outside and use the speed all the time? And he does at times, but he's been more effective inside the tackles than I thought, especially around the goal line. They brought in Snoop Connor, a big goal line back. I think in the 5th round out of Ole Miss, who had a ton of short yardage touchdowns, but they put ETN in the goal line as well throughout camp, and he had some success there. So he's going to have to be the guy that carries most of the load until Robinson gets back up to speed.
Defensively, pass rush been kind of mediocre the last couple of years. How did I know they brought in Arden Key, they drafted Trayvon Walker. Where is that at right now, do you think, going into the season?
Trayvon Walker is very raw. He doesn't have a pass rush move. He doesn't have a counter. But you kind of knew that coming in because of where he played at Georgia. He played along that defensive line. So, but what he is athletic and long and powerful, and he's just disruptive, and he's creating problems for those tackles. So he creates that kind of an issue on that side. That should free up Josh Allen on the other side. To really kind of get back to the form he had as a rookie, because he was really effective then with 10.5 sacks, but he had Calais Campbell and Yannick Ngakoue next to him. So, he's not a guy that you can that can be the guy that creates the havoc, and teams have to really worry about a ton. But when there's someone else on the other side, he should be able to thrive a little bit. And you mentioned Arden Key, and at the time I thought, well, that's just one of those, bottom of the barrel free agent signings, but he has been really, really good in camp. I've been surprised at how good he's been. And I think he had 6.5 sacks last year, career high, and the way they're using him, moving around a little bit, he's had a lot of success in camp and in the preseason. So it's a much improved pass rush, and we still haven't seen what they're going to get out of Devin Lloyd, the linebacker from Utah, because he missed almost all of camp with a hamstring. Now he's a middle linebacker, but they can use him outside, and that was part of the plan. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all mixes, because they're going to be aggressive on defense. And Mike Caldwell, who came from the Bucks, worked under Todd Bowles with that Bucks defense in the last couple of years. He's going to send those linebackers. So that's going to be fun to watch what they do with Devin Lloyd to kind of supplement all that other pass rush on the edge.
So what are your expectations for them this year then?
They're going to be better. They're going to look like a professional organization. They're going to be run like a professional football team. And they're going to be prepared every week. We're not going to see what happened last year in the season opener, where they came out against the Texans, which was the worst team in the league, or we all thought was the worst team in the league. And they couldn't get lined up. They had a sequence where they had 12 men on the field almost for 3 consecutive snaps on defense.
That's hard to do.
It is very hard to do. And at that point, you kind of knew things were going to be a problem. We're not going to see any of that kind of stuff with the Jags this year. But it's a tough schedule. They have to play the AFC West. So, good luck with that. And they've got to play the NFC East with the Cowboys as well. Philadelphia, Washington. I mean, it's not an easy schedule for this group. So I still think they're in that 6 to 7 win range, which for around here, considering they've won 4 games the last 2 years combined, they'll build Doug Pederson a statue if he gets him to 6 or 7 wins. It'll be right. They'll tear down that Jaguar statue out front, and they'll put one up of him. So I think that they're at least another year away from being a team where you could say, yeah, they can kind of compete for the playoffs, even though they play in the AFC South, which isn't, a great division.
So you looking at this game then, because a lot of people, when the schedule comes like, oh, Jacksonville, is that a layup game for Washington? And I will say Washington should never view it that way because they haven't had enough success to view anybody that way. But how do you look at we're talking several days before the game here. So, but how do you view this game for just how do you view this game?
Well, I think the last time the Jags saw Carson Wentz, it did not go well for Carson Wentz. Yeah. I mean, it was, and look, he probably gets way too much blame on a lot of things, but that game he was just not very good. And the Jags really kind of smacked the Colts around in the mouth. And I think that is giving them a little bit of confidence heading into this game just because of what they did to Carson Wentz last year. But I still have a lot of questions. They've looked good in camp in these spots, but you know what? Are they going to be able to protect Trevor Lawrence? Because that right tackle position has been a swinging gate with Jawan Taylor, and I think he's winning that job. I'm sort of in that you got to show me and prove it to me before I believe you mode. So, are they going to be able to handle McLaurin? What are they going to do in the secondary? Yeah, they've been pretty good in camp, but again, I just have this feeling about this team that like people around here, and I've been burned thinking they're going to be better in the past. So I'm just more like, you know what? Can they stop the run? That was a huge weakness for them last year, and the year before. And if they can do that, then they've got a chance. But offensively, we haven't seen all the pieces together here yet, and I don't know. Like I said, the pass protection's a question. Can they really run the ball if James Robinson isn't in there? ETN, like I said before, has been really good, but it's just been against his guys. And there's always that point when you're in camp where it's like it's your guys. You're watching the den play against themselves, and there's always like, well, how good really are they? So, but to me, it all comes down to that improved pass rush against Carson Wentz. And if they can get to Carson Wentz, then they got a chance to win that game.
What has been the problem with the run defense in the past? Besides the ability to stop it.
Right. They've not been as stout up front at the point of attack, and they've been sort of undisciplined in their run fits. And that has been an issue the past 2 years. And, their linebacker play last couple of years wasn't great. Miles Jack was supposed to be this guy that turned into, one of the league's best all-around linebackers, and he just never did. And a bigger issue was the Jags put the green dot on his helmet, and it just wasn't good for him. He admitted, he's like, I don't like having the green dot. It makes me think too much, which is concerning, when you're talking about your middle linebacker. So they've just been, aside from the talent level, they've just been really undisciplined in the run fits. And when you do that and you get guys out of position, I mean, that's how big plays happen. And, other teams really haven't had to throw the ball against the Jags very much either, because they're nursing leads. So, it's been all of that together, but they made a big signing in free agency with Foley Fatukasi from the Jets, who's a big run stuffer, but he's, dealing with a calf injury. So how effective will he be?
Right. Well, Mike, I appreciate you coming on, and I know the world awaits this matchup on Sunday. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you Sunday.
Thanks, John.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Mike for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. Don't forget, I'm also going to have a prediction on the YouTube channel on Empire Media that'll be out there, I think, on Friday afternoon. So check that out. Otherwise, I'll be back on Sunday after the game, the season opener against the Jaguars, with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. Talk to you next time.